process, we're told, well, it never wasn't like that in the first place. It really wasn't like that. It seems that there is an objective object over there, so conventionally we talk about the object being there and the mind perceiving it. But when you look closer from the point of view of the Prasangika school, you would say that object does not exist independent of the mind. It only exists because there is mind. So there seems to be a contradiction. There actually is, because the Sautrantika explanation explains everything we learn, the way you just described, from the point of view of objective existence. And then just the fact that conventionally there's an object there and then a mind arises, that is then taken to be explained by the Prasangika school, but then the objectivity falls away. And then the difficulty is to explain how you talk about that as being a cause that gives rise to eye consciousness, but nonetheless it only exists because of the eye consciousness. And there you have to find the middle way. That's the difficulty.
You do say there's external objects.
Conventionally external. Conventionally external. So they appear, they're conventional in the sense that we differentiate between those phenomena that are internal versus external, but not objectively. Objectively means independent of mind. And that's, from a Buddhist point of view, impossible. Independent of causes and conditions is impossible. Independent on parts is impossible. And even deeper than that, independent on mind. And this is the hardest thing to understand in Buddhism. It comes down to, one of the most difficult things, understanding that phenomena can exist, although they only exist subjectively. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Okay, are you cold or hot? You're hot. Depends. So going back to mindfulness. Now, with regard to the etymology, what I said earlier, so we have two ways of looking at mindfulness versus wisdom. In particular here, so close placement of mindfulness. When we talk about close placement of mindfulness, so it's defined as an awareness that is either wisdom or mindfulness. Actually, Eris, who just asked me a question about this, I wasn't sure it would come up, so I very conveniently ignored it, but the question was asked, so I might as well just answer it. It's this difficulty of understanding what are called mental factors. I sometimes use the word mental function, but right away he picked up on it and it said, well, is it really just the function? No, that's not the case. Actually, we talk about certain awarenesses, types of consciousness, from the point of view of their function. From the point of view of their main function, we differentiate between them. But then we have this weird tendency, the moment we ascribe two things slightly different qualities, we see them as totally unrelated. So we have a hard time understanding that one consciousness can have a part that is feeling, a part that is discernment, a part that is love, with all of them being part of each other, but still being able to differentiate. So because we have this difficulty, sometimes I use a different example. I use the example of a person. So let's take Eris. I've already used the example when I talked to him. So let's take Eris the person. Eris the person is like consciousness itself, just awareness. So just awareness, we talk about a prime consciousness. So prime consciousness is just looking at that part of consciousness that is able to do the most basic thing that any consciousness can do. Perceive its object, right? In general, that's the most basic ability of consciousness. That is a prime consciousness. So looking at that, so we just look at Eris. What is the main thing Eris does? He's a guy. He's a person. Right? That's the main function. That is Eris the person. But then you have Eris the mechanic. I don't know whether you are, just assume. Or Eric the cook. Okay? I don't know, can you cook? But never mind. So let's assume Eric knows how to cook, but he's also really good at fixing cars. So there's Eric the mechanic. There's Eric the cook. That is also person Eric, but it's from the point of view of a specific function of fixing a car. Is Eric the cook always active? No. Right now he's not. Fortunately, he's not cooking away. He's listening. He's Eric the student, right? Is Eric the mechanic always active? No, it's not. But can you separate Eric and Eric the mechanic? No. If I kill Eric the mechanic, I still go to prison because I killed Eric. Eris. Okay, so does that make sense? So you can't separate them, as in like literally separate Eris from Eris the mechanic, etc. But we can still distinguish between them. And Eris is always Eris the person. You always have that aspect of just Eris there. So you always have a prime consciousness. You always have that basic ability or a part of awareness that just perceives its object. So you always have a prime consciousness, as it's called, a primary or a main consciousness. Main consciousness is just saying the main ability, the main thing it does is to perceive its object. From the point of view of the awareness doing that, we speak of it as a prime consciousness. But then it does more than that. Right? It was more than that. So Eris, his main function is to just be a person. But he's also breathing. He's a breathing Eris. That's always, he's omnipresent. Right? I mean, it'd be very scary if he stopped doing that. So, there's the omnipresent breathing Eris. That's like discernment, for instance. There's the omnipresent perceiving Eris. That's like the feeling. So, there are all these things that Eris does. The main thing is just being a person, or the main thing that consciousness does is perceiving its object, but then at the same time it discerns, it contacts an object, there's a feeling, there's an experience of pleasure, etc. So those are the mental functions. And then sometimes there's mindfulness, not all the time. So there's the awareness when the awareness also performs the function of being mindful. So just from the point of view of that mindful awareness, that aspect, we talk of mindfulness. Does that make sense? So then Era's question was, when we say wisdom, is wisdom the ability to know? Is it the knowing? Right? No, it's none of those. It is an awareness that has the ability to know and knows. So it's an awareness that knows its object, right? That's, like I said, consciousness is an agent that has an object and does something with the object. In the case of wisdom, it is an agent that knows its object, right? And it can only do so because it has the ability to know, right? But having the ability to doing something and doing it are different things. I have the ability, or Eris has the ability to fix a car, doesn't mean he does it right now. Okay, so the ability is already there before, but we can say that awareness, wisdom, right? Wisdom is that mind which knows its object because it has the ability to do so. So it's not the knowing, that's just the activity. So like Eris, we wouldn't say Eris fixes a car. The fixing of the car is not Eris. It's something that Eris does. So the funny thing is, like, we have a harder time to understand these ideas when it comes to consciousness, because we don't really know consciousness, but we know people. So therefore, I like the example of Eris, because the things that Eris does is because he has a consciousness. So that's why the example works well. But if you have a hard time understanding these mental factors, like wisdom, etc., just think of consciousness being like a person, being an agent, able to do certain things. And from the point of view of what it does, we give it different names. That's it. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Since it came up, I thought I might as well go into it. All right, but going back to mindfulness. So there is that particular awareness that when it rises in the form of being mindful, we call it mindfulness. And that's what we're interested in. And in particular, close placement of mindfulness here is a type of awareness that is either wisdom or mindfulness. One of the two. Okay, that's one of the characteristics. Now, it is also, strictly speaking, said to be a path consciousness. A path. Okay, what does that mean? A path. A path. There's a way of describing consciousness, giving them the word path. Giving them the name, path. path, using the word path. So consciousness, which takes you closer to either liberation or enlightenment, is described as path. Okay? So it's just a weird way. It's like you want to go somewhere, you need a path to go there. So liberation is, the analogy of liberation is like a place going somewhere. Of course, you're not really going somewhere, but that's the closest analogy, maybe, or an analogy that works. Right now, we're in this place where we have afflictive emotions, we suffer, we have difficulties, and we want to be liberated from it. So it's like using the analogy of going somewhere. So liberation and enlightenment, a mind that is free from those emotions, is like a place somewhere, and we can only go there if there's a path that takes us there. So it's a certain awareness that takes us there. So what is that awareness? How would you describe a consciousness that can be called a path consciousness? In other words, that which transports you towards liberation or enlightenment. Very simple. It's a consciousness that is influenced by the aspiration to go there. Right? You have to have the wish to go there. You have to have the wish to be liberated, or the wish to be fully enlightened. The moment you have that wish, and that wish is sincere from the depth of your heart, and it now informs all your actions, it influences all your actions, then any consciousness that arises influenced by that is called a path. Right? So here, this is a very strict interpretation of close placement of mindfulness. It's saying it has to be a mind that either is influenced by the wish to become self-liberated at the least, or for the benefit of all sentient beings, wants to be fully enlightened. Okay? But anyway, that's just a minor. You could still describe close mindfulness without that particular characteristic, because you could have that even before. So everything about close mindfulness, close placement of mindfulness, except the fact that except the wish to be liberated or fully enlightened, you could have that even while you've not entered a path, right? So for us right now, we could generate a close placement of mindfulness, except we're not on the path. So that aspect, that characteristic, strictly speaking, would not be fulfilled unless you wish really to be self-liberated or really to become a Buddha. Okay, I don't know, some of you may, but basically as ordinary people, I think we have other aspirations than those, right? Just to be happy in this lifetime. But all I'm trying to say is that's not the main characteristic. The main characteristic is of close placement of mindfulness, the main characteristic that it's either wisdom or mindfulness. And another one is that it focuses either on the body, on feeling, on speech, or on phenomena. Okay, that's pretty easy. It focuses on anything that exists, because those four categories basically include everything that exists. And we just made that category in a specific way because the first three are most important. But then there's this next specification, that it focuses on any of those phenomena and basically analyzes their specific and general characteristics. It analyzes their specific and general characteristics. Now that's where the difficulty comes in. What does that mean? It analyzes its specific and general characteristics. Okay. Now everything has characteristics. Everything has. But then we differentiate between the specific ones and the general ones. Now, if you take, for instance, the body, take the example of the body. Close placement of mindfulness on the body. Close placement of mindfulness on the body. So you place mindfulness or wisdom on the body. That's your focus, your own personal body. And now you take characteristics of the body that are important. What is important to understand about the body? A lack of understanding which causes us to suffer. What are the typical things we need to come to understand? What is it that we don't understand and which therefore leads to suffering? What comes to mind in terms of the body? Impermanence. Very good. There you go. The fact that the body is changing moment by moment. misunderstanding of that leads us to the sense our body is going to be around forever, right? And it's not going to change. And then one day we look in the mirror and go, oops, oh, it did change, right? Or we try everything to keep it that way, exactly. All right. So, therefore, a specific characteristic of the body is that the body, and here the specific characteristic in particular means my body. Okay? So specific versus general characteristics. There's two ways of looking at those. One way is to say my body in particular has that general characteristic of being impermanent. Okay? Has that characteristic of being impermanent. That is one way of looking at it. Or when I say general characteristic, I could say that in general, any body is impermanent. So here I bring in, first I focus on my own body, that is the foundation. That is the practice of the foundational, or the foundational practices, as you find in the Hinayana, or foundational, as I'm like, I have to start with myself. Okay? So I'm changing. I'm changing moment by moment. Nothing remains the same. And once I understand that, I focus on others. Not just me. All sentient beings, their bodies are changing. So an understanding, the fact that we're changing and that misunderstanding that leads to so much suffering. So love and compassion can arise. Think, how much suffering do I experience because of not understanding that my body is changing constantly? Right? Not being in touch with that. Not being able to go with the flow and trying to keep it. Buy this cream, have that surgery. If you go to that extreme, a lot of suffering arises. Okay? For whatever reason. So I think it's pretty obvious. We're all aware of that. But not just me. Look around. How many people suffer? My suffering is just the suffering of one person. But all the suffering in this world because of people not really comprehending that. So everyone is impermanent. And of course, this takes it to the level of love and compassion, but even without taking it all the way to that, there is something in between. Because not only am I attached to my own body, I'm attached to others' body. And that is impermanent. So again, just within my own suffering, within my own problems, or from the point of view of my own problems, my own difficulties, understanding my own body is impermanent, and understanding that the body of other people, those I'm attached to, is impermanent. Or the body of the people I dislike is also impermanent. The fact that it's changing. All right? So that is one way of looking at it. And the same you can do with the feeling, with feeling. My own personal feeling, feeling of others. Okay, so I'll just give you like a rough, and then I go more into detail. So my own feeling, feeling of others. My own mind, mind of others. Okay, so there's one way in which I can take different types of characteristics, such as impermanence, such as the suffering nature of things. The fact that my body is in the nature of suffering. What does that mean? It is prone to suffering. They use the word unclean. Now that's a really weird word. I don't even like it. I don't like that word. But it doesn't literally mean unclean as in like, I'm dirty. Okay? I mean, we'll go, well, I had a shower. What are you saying? Right? But actually the fact that I had to have a shower to have it clean indicates something. Right? That our body is not naturally clean. It's not like you leave it for a few days and it starts to shine, right? And smells better and better. No, in fact, if I leave it the way it is, right, without using water and soap, boy, what happens? So there is really something to it. It's harder to detect this in the 21st century because we're so showering so often. It's very difficult to become aware of that. But, if you're in Tibet and you only shower at Lhasa, which is once a year, I think you're much more aware of what your body produces, right? Okay. But anyway, so the fact that our body is actually a burden. It's very fragile. I mean, all you need is a drop of water from a Calcutta tap. That's it. Right? I mean, something is tiny that you can't even see it may kill you, actually. So very fragile. Very fragile. Prone to experience problems all the time. So the thing we're so attached to, we think is so precious, it has to be beautiful, etc. So we have these complicated relationships with our body. On one hand, we're very attached, but because we're so attached, we expect it to have a certain shape, a certain color, and if it doesn't, we don't like ourselves. It's because of our attachment that we have such high expectations of this body, right? And are never satisfied with it. So it's a very strong attachment, and there's a sense of purity there. It's something special, more special than the body of others. Have you ever noticed when you look at a photograph, you first look for yourself? Where am I? Group photograph. No, and we don't notice the expressions of other people, but you'd certainly notice your own expression. Oh, I'm not smiling. Oh, my funny teeth. Right? So right away, my body. That's the center of everything. Group photographs. We always look for that. Okay. So therefore, there's a sense that this body is something precious, something, etc. So a really strong sense. So here it's very difficult to find the balance between, yes, it is precious, it's a vessel, we can do lots of things with it, versus totally exaggerating its importance, its value, and being so attached to it and wanting to be beautiful, etc. There's a fine line between the two. It's not hard to definitely necessarily find a balance. But understanding that this body is unclean. So this is what is mentioned in one text by Gyaltsab-je. Gyaltsab-je was a disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa. So in the Gelugpa tradition, you have three great masters. You have Lama Tsongkhapa, who's the founder of this particular tradition. So in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, before the coming of Lama Tsongkhapa, he was born in the 14th century. So before Lama Tsongkhapa came to Tibet, there were other three traditions, beautiful, complete Buddhist traditions, who exist to the present, totally complete systems in and of themselves, presenting the path to enlightenment. But different people need different things. So at the time of Lama Tsongkhapa, the disciples, or the people, his environment, he felt a need, there was an explanation, something needed to be explained that was slightly different according to people's needs. So it was not a different idea altogether, but it was a different way of presenting it. That's it. It's just a different way of using terminology, a different way of emphasizing certain things. So we, as part of our studies, we studied the other traditions. And so in the other traditions, there was more emphasis on emptiness. A lot of emphasis on emptiness. Which, if you have a strong holding on to inherent existence, very helpful. But reading Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, there's more emphasis on what exists. So for some people who have a tendency to fall into the extreme of nihilism, that becomes important. So we're all different. For some of us, we fall more into the extreme of there's nothing there the moment you start denying objective existence. And there are those of us who have such a strong sense that things exist objectively, we need to emphasize more the fact that phenomena can't exist that way. So we're all slightly different. And so depending on our perception or misperception, we need to stress one over the other. So when you look at the Kagyu, Nyingma, and Sakya tradition, in particular Nyingma and Kagyu, there's more emphasis on how things do not exist, which is totally appropriate for a certain group of people. But then if you look at Lama Tsongkhapa, so this is just my guess from what he's taught, that there were people who fell into the extreme of nihilism as a result of not properly understanding what was set forth in the other systems. And so therefore Lama Tsongkhapa saw a need, at least with regard to explaining this particular concept of what is called selflessness or emptiness, with a slightly different emphasis. So he set forth the system of the Gelug. So all I'm trying to say is that there's no contradiction, that there's just a different way of using words according to how people understand these words and in accordance to what kind of perceptions or misperceptions they already have. So, Lama Tsongkhapa therefore founded the Gelugpa tradition in Tibet. And one of his disciples was Gyaltsab-je and another one was Ketub-je. So their writings, Ketub and Gyaltsab, you know those names. Ketub. So Ketub-je is basically just saying the excellent one, the master. So Je is like a honorific. So Ketub and Gyaltsab versus Lama Tsongkhapa, Je Tsongkhapa, where the J is at the beginning, Je Tsongkhapa, and Ketub J and Gyaltsab J, the J is at the end. Never mind, it's not important. But the point is that those three disciples, their writings are seen as representative of the main kind of ideas set forth in this particular tradition. Okay, all right. Now, in Gyaltsab Je, so Gyaltsab Je has talked about the 4 types of mindfulness in one of his texts called The Ornament of the Essence. Yeah, so The Ornament of the Essence. Yeah, The Ornament of the Essence, that works, right? That's how you translate it. So, The Ornament of the Essence is a commentary which is basically very important commentary, very widely studied, which basically deals with another text. It's a commentary on another text by someone called Maitreya. Maitreya, a great master, who gave a teaching to a Sangha. You already heard his name, a Sangha. So Maitreya was a great master who gave a teaching to a Sangha on the different meditative states that were set forth by the Buddha in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So here I'm really confusing you, but basically all I'm saying is that the Buddha gave different teachings, and you can divide those teachings into 3 categories. The first category of teaching on the Four Noble Truths and other sutras, other teachings that are part of that, the first turning of the wheel. Then there's the second turning of the wheel, which are the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and the last turning of the wheel, which are teachings that particularly address apparent contradictions in the first and the second wheel. Okay? So, basically, those are the 3 categories of teachings to simplify what the Buddha has taught. And of those, the second body, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, are considered very important. Very important because they teach 2 aspects. The methods to become fully enlightened and the object that needs to be understood in order to become fully enlightened, which is emptiness. So both of those are presented in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. The different path, that is the different awarenesses, the methods to take you to enlightenment, the different meditations, and the main object you need to focus on emptiness. Those are both taught in this particular sutra. But it's difficult to understand. Those were really long, sometimes very long sutras, so difficult because of their length, and sometimes very short, difficult because of their terseness. So different versions of these sutras. And because of the great commentators that came after the Buddha, who were aware of people's needs, of the change in which language was used, etc., at the time of their presence, they explained what the meaning of those sutras were. So Maitreya was one of those commentators who took the explanation of the sutra, in particular of the different means and methods to become enlightened, and explained them in his commentary called the Abhisabhaya Alankara, or the English translation is Ornament for Clear Realizations. So a very important text, considered very important because of explaining the meditative techniques that are described in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras very clearly. Well, clearly for his time. If we read it now, we go, whoa, I need an explanation. Because of course, times have changed, and these explanations no longer make the same sense that they used to the people at the time. But the point is that this text, Maitreya's text, which is still studied widely, considered a commentary on the sutras that I just mentioned, well, that text has been explained by Gyaltsab Je. Okay, by Gyaltsab Je. And in Maitreya's text, he mentions the four close placements of mindfulness in the context of 37 practices. 37 practices which are concordant with enlightenment. Okay, so 37 practices. So you don't need to know these 37 practices. Some of you do already know. The Noble Eightfold Path, you may have heard of that. There are certain mental never mind, I don't need to go into all these details. But just that you know that in the context of these 37 practices, the first 4 are the practices of the close placement of mindfulness. Okay, so now you can somehow place it a little bit. I'll repeat what I just said. So, as you already heard in the Theravada, that is in the Pali tradition, close placement of mindfulness is seen as a basis, is taught very widely. In the Satipatthana Sutra, for instance, there's extensive explanation of this practice. In the Mahayana Sutras, in the Mahayana tradition, it is not that there's not a particular Mahayana Sutra that sets those forth, but rather the Buddha has explained those 4 mindfulnesses in the context of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. He's mentioned them again and again in different sutras. And so then when Maitreya tried to summarize or explain basically what is in those different Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, there's so many of them, longer ones, shorter ones, he made it simpler, he simplified the explanation by explaining the 4 types of mindfulness as a part of 37 practices to enlightenment. Okay? So, and in that context, therefore, then later on, with the different commentaries that were written by Gyaltsabje, for instance, in the context of explaining those 37 practices, the 4 types of mindfulness were specifically mentioned and explained, defined, categorized, and so forth. A lot of explanation? No. In the Golden Rosary, first, two commentaries that I relied on. One was Gyaltsabje's text, Ornament of the Essence, 3-4 pages at the most. The Golden Rosary by Lama Tsongkhapa, another commentary, also 4 or 5 pages at the most. Okay, so, and they're very similar, very, very similar. So there's not that much, because as already said earlier, they're not difficult to understand, they're difficult to apply. All right, but what do you find in Gyaltsabje's text? In Gyaltsabje's text, you find the explanation of the close types of mindfulness. So, as already said, either refers to wisdom or mindfulness itself, one of the two, with one giving rise to the next, as also already mentioned, focusing on body, feeling, mind, or phenomena, any of those 4, and looking at their specific analyzing, that is, basically investigating, analyzing their specific characteristic versus their general ones. Now, I already mentioned one way of looking at specific and general ones, but there's another way which Gyaltsabje describes. He takes the 4 Noble Truths and applies them. And actually, Lama Tsongkhapa does that too, but it's more obvious with Gyaltsabje's explanation. So you take the 4 Noble Truths and you apply them to body, feeling, mind, and phenomena. How? That's the big question. So this is slightly difficult, but it makes total sense if you understand it. Is there anyone who doesn't know the 4 Noble Truths? Okay, good. All right, everyone knows that. So, first, you start off with the specific characteristics. So, close placement of mindfulness takes to mind the specific characteristics and the general, but at different times, not simultaneously, of course. But let's look at the specific ones. Specifically, number 1, the body. The body, what is if you take just the body, the specific characteristic is that it's unclean. The specific characteristic of feeling is that it's in the nature of suffering. The specific characteristic of the mind is that it's impermanent. And the specific characteristic of phenomena is that they're selfless. I'll repeat. With regard to the body, understanding that the body is unclean. I like to use another word. Limited and fragile. Prone to suffering, right? Limited and fragile. Let's put it that way. Okay, so the body is unclean. Second, feeling is in the nature of suffering. Feeling is in the nature of suffering. Third is mind is impermanent. And fourth is phenomena are selfless. Okay, now I want to challenge you. What does that have to do with the 4 Noble Truths? The first, mind being unclean, relates to the truth of suffering. Feeling being in the nature of suffering relates to the truth of the origin of suffering. Mind is impermanent refers to the truth of cessation. And phenomena are selfless refers to the path. It's not easy. It's not easy. And usually we're not asked that question. We just read the text and it's right in there. But I want to check whether you can come to an understanding. So, of course, we're not saying to understand the truth of suffering, we only look at the body. That would be ridiculous. You have to look at other things too. But here, in this particular context, it's the body. Why the body? Why do we focus on the body to understand the truth of suffering? Go ahead. Very good, you can easily be aware of it, right? I mean, it's very hard to be aware of the mind. What is it we need to do with suffering? We need to know it. We need to understand it. We need to understand that we are mistaken. What we consider to be true happiness is actually not true happiness. I mean, we don't need to understand it. It's not like saying you should. It's like, if you do, I can offer you something greater than that. It's just a matter of choice. It's not about like, this is right, this is wrong because I say so. No. We are basically like prisoners with the doors wide open, believing we are free. We're in these prisons, turned away from the door basically. The doors are wide open. Well, we believe we're so free. Right? That's our predicament. We experience something that is not true happiness. We want true happiness. We want lasting happiness. We all want that. It's very clear because whenever there's something we want, there's a sense, if I'm just going to be with this person, I'm going to be happy forever. Right? There's this promise. It's almost like a hidden promise that we believe. So we want that. We actually want this lasting happiness. We crave it. And we deserve it. We're just not looking in the right direction. And so as Vara is saying, so our body, it's pretty obvious what's going on with our body, which is a result of what we've accumulated in the past. I mean, it's a limited body. Let's be realistic about it. It's very, very limited. And however strong we cherish it, and we should cherish it with wisdom, cherish it as a vessel, as the vessel that enables us to become liberated, to become enlightened. But that's not how we look at it. Right? We don't see it as a mere vessel that has limitations. No, we identify very strongly with it. Right? Not only do we see it as the vessel of the self, sometimes there's a sense, it is me. I am my body. Right? So whatever anyone says about my body, that's what I believe I am. Okay? Right? So we have a very distorted relationship with our body. So we look at our body, not only observing it, but also looking at what is going on. That is the specific characteristic, focusing specifically on being unclean. But more generally, we take into consideration the fact that it's changing all the time, that it doesn't exist objectively, that it doesn't exist independently. It is dependent on so many other factors. So we'll take into consideration not just that specific characteristic of the fact that it's unclean, but also impermanent, doesn't exist objectively, and so forth. Does that make sense? Prone to suffering being the nature of suffering. So that is the way Geshe specifically explains those. So it's basically understanding the body better. Focusing specifically on the fact it's unclean, related to understanding suffering better, because that's what we start off with. Like, let's face it, when we learn about the Four Noble Truths, we focus on the mind too, but the mind is just more difficult to understand. We're not as aware of the mind as we are aware of the body. So to know suffering, it makes perfectly sense to focus on the thing that is part of us that is more obvious. Okay, great. That's the first one. What is the second one? Close placement of mindfulness on feeling. Now, with regard to the specific quality, as said by Why? What does that have to do with the second truth? The truth of the origin of suffering. Why specifically feeling when it comes to the second truth? Now, okay, what are you supposed to do with the truth of the origin? The truth of suffering we're supposed to understand. What about the second truth? What are we supposed to do with that? Abandon. Overcome it. It's the cause of suffering. So we understand the result, and then we want to overcome the cause. So overcome. All right. So how do I get from A to B, basically? How do I get from understanding that feeling is in the nature of suffering? How does that take me to generating the desire to overcome the origin of suffering? What do you think? Because feeling, yes, please go ahead. What's your name again? I forgot. Imbal. I always get confused with Elabzor. Imbal, Elabzor. It's Imbal from Emabzor. Imbal. Okay, so Imbal, go ahead. So you're saying? Right. Right. So that's another way of looking at it. So both Venerable Sangye Kajula and what Imbala is saying. So starting with what Imbala is saying, well, basically with the body, with regard to the body, it is really the feeling in the body. It's the feeling in the body that gives rise to everything we do, right? All our actions, basically, our mental actions. We're basically focused on the body, the sensations, beautiful sights, beautiful sounds, etc. So how do the sense consciousnesses feel at that time? And then as Venerable Sangye Kajula says, well, it gives rise to the different afflictions then, right? So more specifically to those harmful emotions. If it were just driving us to do things, those feelings were just driving us to do something that is neither harmful or not, that wouldn't be a problem. But the problem is that these feelings specifically give rise to afflictive emotions that harm us. To anger, repulsion versus attachment, craving, or indifference, ignorance. Okay? So therefore it's important to understand that... okay, let me just read to you what it says here. By Bel Gelsabje, what it basically says is, by closely placing mindfulness on feeling, we will engage true origins, because having seen that craving is induced by feelings, we will generate the wish to abandon craving. Okay, very simple actually. So, it's not really blaming, we don't blame the feeling. So it's not like, oh my God, let's stop feeling because that gives rise. No. Feeling is just one of those causes. One of the main causes, but nonetheless, it's really because the afflictions are there. So it's the afflictions. Once the afflictions are gone, you can have as many feelings as you want, nothing will happen. Okay? So basically, it's the afflictions we need to overcome, but by way of understanding how these feelings work and how they give rise to these different afflictions. Now, in this context, I want to say a little bit about the afflictions in a way that works for the 21st century. I don't know, you see, like, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, very recently, or not that recently, but he's been talking for quite some time about the fact that it's not just physical hygiene, we need mental hygiene. Right? He's always using that word. He literally uses the English word hygiene. He says, we're so concerned with the body physical well-being. Hygiene, of course, came first, and then organic food, blah, blah, the whole thing. So if you look back just a few years, first it was hygiene, have a shower more often, use certain soaps, blah, blah. And then slowly the kind of food we put into us, like with the food we eat, organic versus not, exercising and all that. I mean, especially in Israel, there's so much emphasis on that. Right? I mean, considering such a small country, how much healthy hamburgers you have, like, what is it, that main road, like healthy falafel and Buddha burger and all that. So, it's beautiful, it's great. I mean, there's this emphasis, but we're already very good at this, so now we should also bring it to the mind. Both physical, healthy body, healthy mind. So very important. Now, with regard to these two, so mind and body, well, what was I going to say? How did I start? With the afflictions. So, basically, oh yes, so it's very interesting when you go online and you want to find out what are the advantages of certain foods, you Google garlic. And then it says 10 advantages of eating garlic, right? It gives you a list of those. So that's a very common way. Okay, 23 of this, 5 of this, and so forth. So likewise, we need to do the same with the afflictions. The advantages, the disadvantages of afflictions versus positive states of mind. So what are they? If we compare those two, like I said earlier, Buddhism is all about being happy, but by applying the methods, the true methods to becoming happy. What are the true methods? Removing certain negative afflictions, certain of negative emotions, and replacing them with positive ones. If you want to summarize Buddhism, that's all. That's it. It's actually very simple, very straightforward. Except it's very difficult to replace them, those negative ones, and because we don't really want to. We don't really want to. Right? We don't really, it's difficult. It takes a lot of time. We're so used to those negative ones, and by allowing them to arise, we reinforce them, and it's a constant cycle, basically. So, we need an incentive. We need an incentive understanding that the origin of suffering, the cause, the actual cause of suffering, the origin, the afflictions, which is the main cause, there are so many disadvantages. So let's count them. Make a list. How many reasons are there? What are the disadvantages? What are the advantages of emotions such as love, compassion, etc.? It's like, what is the advantage of kale versus a hamburger? Right? You go through it, and after a while you want to eat kale, you don't want to eat a hamburger. Well, depends on how strong your wish is to be healthy. But have you ever watched your own mind? It's very interesting how you go, oh, I should eat more kale. 23 reasons to eat kale. Oh, that's really, the more reasons, we're totally into quantity, so never mind whether it's true or not, but okay, so there are these different reasons giving, and suddenly I feel like eating kale, right? Or whatever, yeah? Versus something else. I hear this is bad for you. So it's a very healthy way, it's a good way of doing this. This is very good if it's in accordance with reality. So let's do it with the afflictions. Okay, please, I need a list of disadvantages of afflictions, why there's something we should overcome, and why we should work towards more love and compassion. Okay, who wants to start? I'm pretty sure I have a few to offer that I'm not 100% sure, but you may not have heard of them. And you may also contribute, give a contribution to like advantages that no one else has heard of them before. All right, who wants to start? Afflictions versus constructive emotions, love, compassion, honesty, fairness, etc. Yes. Very good. Yeah. Very good, very good. Okay, there you have already very extensive explanation. Okay. So, short-term harm, long-term harm. Physical harm, mental harm. Very good. But these aspects you already... Okay. With afflictions, afflictive emotions such as anger, etc., those states of mind, first of all, when they arise, they harm us. They make us unhappy in that moment. So we feel unhappy. That's with regard to short-term suffering, short-term problems. We're no longer satisfied and happy. In terms of long-term suffering, of course, they make us engage in actions. They induce certain activities of body, speech, and mind, which right away make us lose our friends and have trouble in family and so forth. But even from the point of view of long-term experiences, taking into consideration karma, then we have experiences possibly in a future life. So this is an important point. I also want to bring in karma. since we're already talking about the second truth, something that is very important. And one of my teachers has just recently given a beautiful teaching. He's one of the meditators in Dharamsala, also a great Geshe, who usually when His Holiness has a meeting with scientists, he always calls him, very wonderful person, very special, Geshe Kelsang. He's given us a teaching and he explained karma in a very beautiful way. So before I go into more the afflictions, I just want to make that share with you what he said. We talk about afflictions. When they arise, right away they give rise to unhappiness. Is that karma? Is that affliction as it arises giving rise a second later? Is that the karmic result of the affliction? No, it's not a karmic result of the affliction. No, not at all. Okay. Then, let's say, as a result of the affliction, as a result of this anger, I start having an argument with my partner. And then the partner leaves me. The partner leaving me, is that the result of the karma accumulated because of the affliction? No. No. Okay. Why not? Pardon? No, it's slightly different. Give you another example. If I steal out of craving, out of attachment, I steal in this lifetime and I go to prison. Me going to prison in this lifetime as a result of stealing, is that the karmic result of the stealing? Why not?
Because karma it's like a seed and then you have the fruit. You have time between the action.
Well, let's say I've robbed this bank and I've been hiding for 40 years and somehow they decide...
It doesn't have to have a connection to the deed itself.
Why not? Why not? There's a specific reason for that. Yes? Well, it could be very complete. I robbed the bank, I planned to rob it, I wanted to rob it, I rejoiced in robbing it. It's complete. As complete as it gets. I spent the money... Well, let's say I'm really joyful about robbing that bank. Got the money, I'm so happy. It's a complete action. And I go to prison. Why is that not the karmic result of that? Why can it not be?
Because it needs to be the same.
It's not the same, right? You have to be somebody stealing from you.
That's it. Okay, so karma is such that there's a correlation between the action and the experience. A correlation. So, basically, we have 3 types of karmic results. There's different ways of explaining. I'm not even going to go into all the detail, but basically there's a feeling that arises. A feeling arises as a result of a certain action. Then there is an experience they have, which also a result of that action. And an environmental result. Okay. So, but in general, what's important to understand, the result of stealing is having something taken from you. The result of killing, the karmic result, not just a general result, but the direct correlated, the karmic result of killing is having one's life shortened. Dying prematurely, basically. So it's like the result of an apple is an apple tree. It's not a peach tree. Right? It is not potatoes or whatever. So this is like it's a law of nature. It's considered to be a law of nature, and the result must correlate. So is there a relationship between stealing and going to prison? Yes. It's the law of cause and effect that is at work here. But not everything is a karmic result. That's important. So this is what Geshe Kelsang very much stressed. And His Holiness has said it over and over. Not everything is a karmic result. Not everything is a result of a specific... certain, of course, resultant experiences are karmic results, but not necessarily of the stealing or of the killing. If everything were karma, then we wouldn't have any free will. If everything was a karmic result, me making a decision to practice the Dharma, if that was a karmic result, then I wouldn't have any choice. It's a result, but it's not a karmic result. So there's a huge misunderstanding. This is where people ending up thinking there's no free will, because there's just karma pushing me back and forth, and I can't make any decisions.
Isn't when you have dharma in your life now, isn't that a result of?
It's a result, but not a karmic result. There's a difference. A result versus a karmic result.
No, a karmic result of being practicing Buddhism or Dharma in the past.
No.
Past lives.
No. A tendency, just the tendency of this. But to make the decision, I will now go to such and such. If that was all karma, then we will just ripening of karma, and we wouldn't make any decisions. So it's.
This result is understandable. If it were like this, there was no free.
Okay, let me first finish. Before you ask, sorry, Leora, but I'm trying to address exactly that idea. It's a little difficult, but Geshe emphasizes this very strongly because I feel it really helps to understand properly. So please don't misunderstand that if something is a result, or if something is not a karmic result, that is not a result. It is nonetheless a result. That's important to understand. So let me just finish with the idea of the prison versus the action. So if I steal from someone and I'm imprisoned, being imprisoned is not a karmic result of stealing, but it's a result of stealing. Definitely a result of stealing. Exactly. It is the karmic result of something else. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's the karmic... No, that's different. This is going back to this later. It's a karmic... This is a totally different thing. So here I'm saying going to prison is the karmic result of imprisoning someone, basically. Okay. All right. So, therefore, here in this particular case, you have the karmic cause, which is imprisoning someone, which is similar to then being imprisoned. Other results, like a result of being stolen from, is the result of someone stealing. So it's just to understand the nature of karma, that there is a similarity. So we can't understand their full, exactly what is the exact result of an action, but basically this is an incentive. If I don't want others to lie to me, the karmic cause of others being truthful towards me is being truthful. Okay? So whatever I want, what is the result I want? Well, I look at the cause and act accordingly. It's as simple as that. That's the part that he stressed very much with regard to, if we look at this lifetime, certain activities that are results of a negative action, we need to check whether they correlate or not. So the original example, I have a fight I'm angry with my boyfriend or with my girlfriend. As a result of that, I say certain things, I abuse and insult this person and the person leaving me. That is a result, of course, of the affliction, but not the karmic result, or that is the result of the action of being unfair and abusing this person or insulting this person. Yes, it is a result of that, but not the karmic result. So not only are we caught in the law of karma, we're also caught in a different type of law of cause and effect. So the law of karma is a specific type of law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect is a wider category which includes also the law of karma. I think that's really important to understand. So the law of cause and effect includes more. It includes more than the law of karma.
So what is the karma result of that?
Well, for instance, this person leaving me, that if it's a very painful experience of this person leaving me, well, me having left someone in the past, having left a person who loves me, who etc., I just let them go and I find someone else. Could be a result of that. I can't go into that much discussion, I'm sorry, because the moment you start the discussion on karma, the rest will go into that. So, but I still felt like mentioning it. This could be something you could mention in the discussion group, right? But just this much. If that part is clear, and all the other questions, of course, they arise naturally, there's a different time for answering them. So you yourself may be able to answer them. So this is just something I learned as part of my study. If you have a question, don't necessarily right away ask it. Think about it. Because you come to a conclusion and that's much more potent than someone answering it. Okay? But if for now you feel like that general understanding is there, so the fact that certain actions arise, certain afflictions arise in our continuum, so we feel unhappy in that moment. Going back to the disadvantages of karma, the disadvantages of the afflictions, right away there's a feeling of unhappiness. Okay? That is the result of, not the karmic result of the affliction, but a result of the affliction. Then it leads me to do it makes me do certain things in my family, in my community. And again, people act, not necessarily, if I've not created the karmic cause in the past, I'm lucky I can get away with it. But if I have created certain karmic causes in the past, being left, for instance, being left on my own, and if then I create these causes and conditions that then lead to the ripening of that karma, I may actually end up being in a terrible divorce and having problems, etc. So there's not just the karma that I accumulated for that experience, but there are also the other circumstances that allow that karma to ripen. So that's important. You see, this is very important to understand that all of us have the karma to be killed, to have all these terrible experiences. But the reason they arise at different times is also that I create the circumstances for them to arise. Not at all times. Sometimes there are just certain circumstances that arise without my doing. But robbing a bank, for instance, if I have created the karma to be imprisoned, this would be the time to find out. Right? If I haven't created the karma to be imprisoned, I would not be imprisoned. I can rob all the banks in the world. Maybe instead I'd be killed because I create the karma to be killed. So you see, just to get a better understanding, there are also these causes and conditions, which is very important for the time of death too. Because the state of mind we have at the time of death can determine which karma ripens. Right? It can lead to the ripening of a very positive karma at the time of death, because there's also my mental state. So I'm trying to say that, of course, we don't have control over which karma ripens. And it's not like I can live a wonderful life and be very wonderful and kind and everything, but because 1 million years ago I created a particular karma, it may just ripen in this lifetime, and there's nothing I can do. That happens. But oftentimes we also create the circumstances for something to ripen. So it's good to be extra careful. If I generate anger, etc., right away I get unhappy. Furthermore, I harm my relationships, but I also create a karmic cause that may ripen maybe in this lifetime or in a future lifetime. So you see, it's very complicated in the sense that it leads to suffering short-term or long-term. That's one disadvantage you mentioned. But it doesn't just lead to suffering I experience, it also leads to the suffering of others. Of course, they still need to have the karma to suffer, but my actions become one of the triggers that may lead to that ripening of the karma. So, therefore, of a particular karma. So, therefore, it leads to suffering. As one of the disadvantages. I'm only giving all this explanation in order to get a fuller sense of how this is possible. How these afflictions can give rise to suffering. Okay. And just this brief mentioning, which right away led to all this discussion, but I still want to say it. When we make a decision, when we decide, I want to do this or want to do that, the fact that we have a choice, that may be my karma. But the choice I make is not a karmic result, because otherwise I would not make any decisions. So I still make decisions. Okay? So that's the only point I'm trying to make. Okay, great. Now going back to the disadvantages of afflictions. Short-term harm, long-term harm, suffering for myself and others. Plus, here I mentioned mental harm, but also there's physical harm. It's been found by scientists, it has been found that certain emotional states create certain chemicals in the body, with anger and so forth, potentially creating negative chemicals in the body, or harmful substances which harm my immune system, which raise my blood pressure, etc. Okay, so that's again list of negative, like afflictive states versus positive ones. With love and compassion on the other hand, having the opposite effect, making us karma and happiness right away, helping our relationships right away, and in terms of the creation of karma, it's positive type of karma. In other words, it leads to results that I desire, that I wish to experience. Plus, it's healthier from the point of view of the body and from the point of view of the substances released in my body, etc. So, another good reason to work towards overcoming the afflictive ones versus the positive emotions. Okay, what else? What else comes to mind? What are other disadvantages with regard to afflictive states, and what are the advantages of positive ones? Yes?
There's something in the affliction that you're not attached to, it's not attached to I and things.
That's very true. The afflictions reinforce our basic self-grasping. So our self-grasping, our self-cherishing is the cause of our afflictions, but it's again being reinforced. So actually the afflictions reinforce one another. The stronger our grasping, the stronger our anger and repulsion when someone harms the object we're attached to. The stronger our sense of I. Okay, very good. So they reinforce each other. So they reinforce other negative emotions, which again cause more trouble. Whereas love and compassion and so forth, they reinforce other positive ones. If you have love, your compassion grows stronger. If your compassion is strong, your love grows stronger. Your wisdom grows stronger. The more love you have, pure love, the wish for others to be happy, the more space in your mind, more open, and with openness and calmness. So calmness and openness, which gives rise to more concentration, more mindfulness, more wisdom. So other positive states are being enhanced. Okay, what else? Another one. Yes?
Changing the way you experience the reality. Like if you have emotions, you're angry or so you totally, your mind is not into you and everything is bad.
Exactly. Our afflictions are notoriously wrong perceptions. Our afflictions, they're objects. Remember what I said, an awareness is a type of mind, is a type of experiencer which has an object and perceives or does something with the object. Now, the object of our afflictions never exists. That which our afflictions perceive does actually not exist. When I say I'm angry with, I don't know, so-and-so, I'm angry with a particular person, actually, that's just a way of saying, because I feel like I'm angry with that person. But it's the most bizarre thing. We're actually not angry with the person at all. Our anger exaggerates the negativity of that person, which is it's a total projection of what's actually there. Also, we feel we are angry with the cause of the harm that we received. We're not even angry with that cause. We're not angry because the cause is the awareness of the other person. Well, first of all, our karma, of course, to receive the harm. But even if we just look outwards, the other person. So what is the action that gave rise to this person acting in the way that makes me angry? Well, it's his or her anger or his or her aggression, etc. But I'm not angry with his or her aggression. I'm angry with the person. And I'm not angry with the conventional kind of person, right? This guy, which I call this person such and such because of the mind and body. No, there seems to be a separate kind of person there. Something there. Some bad, I don't know, Joe or Tom or whatever, right? Totally unrelated to what's actually there. Seeing this person is totally negative. That's not there. It cannot be found in reality. Forget about objective, subjective, all that. Even if this person existed objectively, in general. Hypothetically, if they did, what my mind perceives totally, that just no, it does not hold in reality. It's a total projection of what's there. Whereas love and compassion, if it's true love and compassion, it is rooted in reality. In fact, it's rooted in the fact that others suffer, that others have problems like myself, and therefore leads to the wish for the others to be happy and to be free from suffering. That's it. It supports reality. It is rooted in reality, whereas the afflictions are not. Okay, what else? That's another reason for why get rid of the afflicted ones. But there's more. What else? I'm not sure I remember all of them, but it separates them from others, it connects us to others, yes, but that's part of the advantage and disadvantage you already mentioned. What else? Well, afflictions are very limited. They're very limited. First of all, you can only have anger towards a certain amount of people. Thanks God. It's very limited. You cannot be angry with everyone. There's a certain limit to it. And after a while, you're so exhausted, can't be bothered. So they're very limited. You cannot be angry with everyone, have hatred towards everyone. It feels that way sometimes. I hate everyone, but you don't really hate that snail or whatever. So the point is, it cannot grow exponentially. It cannot grow endlessly. Our afflictions, fortunately, are very limited in how strong they can grow. And they're always reversible. Always reversible. It's impossible for any type of anger to always be around. There's a certain degree to which it can grow, but it's always reversible. It's not in the nature of the mind. Positive states of mind, they can grow limitlessly. You can learn to love all sentient beings. That's very important. That's so important to understand this, because there's no end. It's kind of this, what's the word for it? Like, it's a type of awareness that it seems we can only share our love with people. I mean, it feels like it's spread thin, but it doesn't spread thin. And the way I found out was in a really embarrassing way when I heard, actually I didn't say that to the person, him or herself, but I said it to a friend who has children, and I heard that this person, the original person that I didn't say this to, had lost one of her children. And I said, well, but she still has some left. It's not so bad. She's got some left. That was almost like, that sense of it was, you spread your love out, So it's like you don't have equal love. So therefore the loss of one child can't be that bad. It was basically based on that assumption. Whereas, of course, if you're a mother, whether you have one child or you have 10 children, the love has just grown to include all of them. So and so that loss of one child is just as bad if you have 10 children or this is your only child. It's just as bad because the love, why? Because we have so much love for this particular being, the loss is the same. So it's not like you love them all a little bit less because you got 10 of them versus just one, because your love spreads thin, like dough when you roll it out, and eventually, it's like you've rolled it out and there's only a little bit left for each cookie, versus like having a thick layer. So this is how it feels. This is how anger works. It weighs thin, right? You hate that person, you've got no energy left for the other one, right? In fact, sometimes when people fight with someone, and then they fight with another person, they make it with the first one. It's just too exhausting to have trouble with this person too, so you move on to the next. But it's just not possible. It wears thin. Whereas with love and compassion, it doesn't happen. No way. It couldn't happen. So it can actually grow stronger towards one person, towards two people, towards more and more. So when you have 10 children, you love them equally. The love is equally strong. So this we need to understand about the power of love. This is for me, this is a very good reason to enhance this. Besides the fact it makes us feel better, it's better for our health and all this, but the fact that it is much more in the nature of our mind and it's much more powerful. So don't don't worry about becoming a friar. You know, anger makes you stronger and love makes you... No, actually it doesn't. The thing is that anger exhausts you. It feels like, oh yeah, it makes me beat this person up, etc. But that never solves the problem anyway. And it exhausts us and it exhausts everyone else. Whereas love and compassion, it grows stronger. It can extend to everyone else. It makes you stronger. It makes you stand up against the Chinese army. Look at this, almost the Dalai Lama. He's one person. So a whole country scared of him, you know, with like how many soldiers there are. Solus doesn't have an army or anything. It's through the power of love that he's so powerful, that he's got so much energy, so much he can do for others. Whereas anger and so forth, it can give us some energy, but it's very limited. Okay? So that's the point. Therefore, love and compassion, they become stronger and stronger. They give us more energy as they grow. Our love then grows even stronger. Plus, anger and so forth is reversible. You can totally eliminate it. You can never eliminate love and compassion. You can totally remove it from your mental continuum, that it never arises again. But you can never eliminate love and compassion. In fact, once they've grown to a certain level, they're irreversible. Once you reach a certain level on the path, then you can never fall back from it. It could get stagnated for some time, surely. But if it doesn't stagnate, if you overcome that obstacle of stagnation, it can only just increase limitlessly. So you see, if you understand the nature of these different states of mind, with one being so limited, just causing us trouble, making us unhappy, robbing us of our energy, of our health, of our good relationship, of our positive karma. It's limited, it's not based in reality, and it's reversible, versus the other ones. Right? So I think we should make a list and put it online. Advantages of afflictions, disadvantages of afflictions, advantages of love and compassion. So I just wanted to share that with you in that particular context. So I'm sure there are other advantages, etc., but we don't have the time for all of those.
Can you give us more example of affliction? Maybe after the break?
Maybe after the break or during easy. Jealousy, love. So jealousy, anger, attachment, craving, arrogance. Hatred, resentment, annoyance.
What about the down and sadness and
No, doubt, particular types of doubt, etc. But you can talk about those in the discussion, or you can ask one of the older students. I'm sure they can give a beautiful explanation. So anyway, the three main ones, craving, hatred, and so forth, they're the main ones, and it is feeling. It is through understanding the second type, feeling, through that we can understand that craving or feeling gives rise to the different types of afflictions, and those are the ones we need to overcome. Oops, I'm over time, totally. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. I was wondering why people get tired. Pardon? Yeah, that's right. So that's a good opportunity they're grown stronger over the... Okay, but anyway, so let's continue with this. You have the discussion group, the 4 types of mindfulness. We'll continue with the other types in the afternoon. And of course, you have plenty of time to do question and answers. So let's dedicating whatever positive potential we've accumulated by listening and reflecting on what we've heard. So may this become the cause for us to remove all our afflictions and replace them with positive states of mind, so that we're able to help others to reach that same state. Okay, with this, please.
בזכות חסד זה, להשיג במהרה את מצב הגורו בודה, ולהוביל למצב זה את כל הנודדים עד אחד. ותודעת ההערה העילאית, פרט הערך, שטרם נולדה, תיוולד, וזו שנולדה לא תתנוון, ותשגה עוד ועוד. בארץ זו המוקפת רכסי הרים ושלגים, מקור הרווחה והעושר ללא יוצא מן הכלל, אבל לא תשבר רב העוצמה תז נדיאצו, לא תיוותר עד קץ הקיום.